Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys checking the video out, regardless if you're one of the 60% of the viewers that are not subscribed to the channel, or if you're 40% of the viewers that subscribe to the channel. Much appreciated there. I was always wondering, before getting to the video, I was always wondering why my watch time is so much higher than other channels that have more subscribers than I do, and that's because 60% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribing to the channel. So sort of found that a little bit interesting, but I'd like to invite everybody to subscribe if they're inclined to do so. Okay guys, today we're going to be talking about, I'm going to make the case against EWG hook, which is one of the most popular hooks out there. I'm sure going to get a lot of blowback on this, just like I do when I talk about braid to fluorocarbon or whatever like this. But I'm here. The only reason I'm doing this video, guys, I'm here to help you guys land more fish, to catch more fish, and I'm going to tell you about the evolutionary process, about how I came to this decision, because it's something that took me decades to realize. So I'll sort of walk you through the process with that a little bit. Now, first of all, the evolution of hooks. I've been around, since the 70s, and there's been a tremendous evolution in the hooks out there. But for many years, up until about, sometime during the mid to late 90s, the EWG style of hook was the most popular hook, and it still is today. Now this is and when I'm talking about the EWG, this is a more modern version. It used to be what was called the offset worm hook. It didn't have the EWG bend. It was basically a straight shank hook with an EWG line tie on there. So you didn't have the extra wide gap that you do now. This is the predominant hook now. But anyway, when we're talking about the EWG hook, I'm also talking about the offset worm hook too, that has this, you can see the offset on the eye there. And it wasn't really until really the late 90s, early 2000s, until the straight shank hook started coming into play, especially in tournaments. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how I found this. Now, like a lot of people, I use the offsets or the EWGs forever, and I did pretty heavily actually up until about 8 or 10 years ago. I primarily used an EWG hook, and I started noticing that I just felt that I was losing more fish than I needed to be losing. It's like when you're talking about a single hook lure, especially when you're pitching and flipping or casting a worm, I expect to land 100% of the fish, and it just wasn't happening. I was probably down at one point to, say for example, if I was flipping docks or laydowns or something like that, I bet that I would lose, anywhere between 10 to 20% of the bites that I got on any given day on the EWG hook. And I just thought it was, maybe the way the fish were biting, or maybe I didn't get a good hook set in it, or the worm was balled up. I kept making excuses. But here's how I figured it out, and how I sort of realized that this was the deal. I was fishing, and I've told this story a little bit here. I was fishing a tournament about 10 years ago down at Grand Lake, and I was pitching and flipping willow trees, and I've got, in fact, here it is right here. I carry this, what I call a practice box. This is just a bunch of old hooks that I have that have maybe got rusted a little bit. They've been sitting in my box, and some of them are bent out, rusted, and I use them to practice with, because in practice, I usually want to shake the fish off, and if I do catch a couple, I don't care if I lose them. But so I've got this little practice box of old oddball sizes of hooks and that type of stuff. And I noticed in this particular one, I pulled out, I remember, like a 2-aught straight shank hook, and I was flipping a brush hog, a zoom brush hog, full side brush hog, and I got this little 2-aught straight shank hook in there. And normally for years I'd be using a 4 or 5-aught EWG hook in a brush hog, and I started pitching and flipping this little brush hog around just with the straight shank 2-aught hook, because I didn't care if I lost them or not. And every time that I got a bite on, the fish would swim out, and I'd try to shake it off, and I was landing all of them. I couldn't shake them off. They were all pinned to the top of the roof there, and I finally just had to cut the hook off completely, because I was hooking everything on this little bitty straight shank hook. So the next day of the tournament, we had the tournament the next day, and I, of course, went back to my old trusty 4/0 hook, 4/0 EWG flipping hook. Actually this one right here, this is 4/0 straight or 4/0 EWG flipping hook. And guys, I had probably, I don't know, 13 or 14 quality fish on that first day of the tournament, and I lost probably 70% of them. They'd come off in the bushes, they'd come off on the way to the boat, they'd jump off. It was the most frustrating thing as it was. I turned out I weighed a limit that day that weighed 10 pounds, and I should have had probably 22, 23 pounds if I'd have got everything in. So I was pretty frustrated with that. So the next day of the tournament, I said, what the heck? It's not going to hurt. I'm going to try something different. And I took just a straight shank Gamakatsu 3/0 hook, put it in that brush hog. Guys, I went out flipping the next day and never lost a single fish. And that convinced me that the straight shank hook has better hooking power. It has better hooking angle. There's something about just the way it's designed. It just works better. Now, I think what happens, one of the reasons that the EWG hook or the offset hook is so popular with anglers is it's very easy. It's angler friendly. It's very angler friendly. You rig it up, you put it in there, and the EWG holds the head of the worm really good. You put it back in the worm, and it's straight, and it just stays straight. It's a very, very easy hook to rig. It doesn't get messed up. It's easy to use. But when you use a straight shank hook, it requires a little bit more effort because, first of all, when you rig a straight shank, even if you have a keeper, like this is the Gamakatsu G Finesse heavy cover worm hook that I went to for everything almost. Even though it's got a good keeper in there, a lot of times, since you don't have that bend in the head of the worm, sometimes the worm will get a little crooked on you, sometimes it'll come out, and then on top of that, you got to be a little bit more creative as far as how you hook the worm in there, because a lot of times, if you don't hook it right, the worm's going to get crooked a little bit, and then if you don't hook it right, you're going to have too much of the point in the bait. So I've talked about this before. I wind up figuring out I just skin hook it in the side. That's how I fish it all the time with that. So given that, it is a little bit more, it's less user friendly in that. I think that's why a lot of people go with the offset or EWG. Now, saying that is, I have went to a straight shank for everything that I possibly can, but there are some exceptions where you can't use it. Say, for example, if you're flipping a tube. Tube is a hollow bodied lure. Straight shank hook just doesn't work very good in it. So in that situation, I have to use an EWG. That's just, you can't get around it. Sometimes if I'm throwing a fluke or something like that, even though I do use a straight shank for most of my flukes, I showed the rigging the way I do a straight shank, but sometimes if I'm fishing it over heavier, cover like that, I will use an EWG, or if I'm fishing like a horny toad or something like that over heavy vegetation. So there's a small minority, there's probably less than 4 or 5 different soft plastic lures that actually I still do use an EWG, and it's not because of the hooking ability, it's because of the rigging ability. You simply can't rig a straight shank and fish it effectively with certain lure categories. And of course, I still lose fish on those using the EWG. But guys, my recommendation is get you some Gamakatsu G Finesse straight shank heavy cover flipping hooks. They come in several different diameters, and just give it a try. I mean, this is something, like I said, I don't have any bias. I don't have anything against the EWG hook. It's just, I land so much more fish on a straight shank hook. And it took me a long time to switch because I really liked using the offset hook because it's easy. The bait stays in place really good. You can skip it. You can pitch it in a heavy cover and it doesn't get goofed up, which sometimes a straight shank hook does. But I realized after that one tournament at Grand Lake that I had been using the wrong hook forever. And guys, if I would have went to a straight shank hook 30 years ago, there's no telling how many more tournaments I would have won back when I was at the top of my game, because I lost a lot of key fish that cost me winning tournaments in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of them. So anyway, I wanted to pass that along so you don't have to, learn the hard way like I do. Hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.